To close out chapter 12, we need to talk about, like we usually do, what can go wrong. So, more specifically, how do you go about avoiding biases or eliminating biases from when you are sampling and collecting data? So, sample badly with volunteers. So, you might think, if I just ask people, hey, will you answer a couple questions? Or, oh, will you fill out this survey? That you'll get useful results. So, in a voluntary response sample, a large group of individuals is invited to respond, and all who do respond are counted. Voluntary response samples are almost always biased, and conclusions drawn from them are almost always useless. And I don't mean to say this as contradictory, but all of the surveys that we send out to students and say, will you please fill these out? Your opinions do matter to us, so we want to hear from you. But because we are not systematic and force responses, we are not necessarily getting people that are representative. Voluntary response samples are almost all certainly biased toward those with strong opinions or those who are strongly motivated. In other words, they are not representative of the population as a whole. For example, let's say the city of Dearborn wants to open up a new park. And so they are clearing the land and they're going to hold a meeting. And they ask for citizen feedback. Well, the people show up to the town hall meeting and they are vociferous in their opinions. And they say, we do not want this to be there. Okay, so the city then sends out a surveying people and they interview people that are at parks and they get largely positive responses. In both of those cases, because the city is not actually being systematic about who they select to volunteer their responses, they are not representative of the entire population of the community. Maybe the people that were at the park is not the entire population. Some people can't go to the park every single day. How about those people that went to the city council meeting? Those are the people that have the most strongly held opinions, and they want their voices to be heard. Well, other people have opinions, they just didn't show up to the meeting. Maybe they were working that night. So since the sample is not representative, the resulting voluntary response bias invalidates the survey. It is in essence useless for statistical inferences. How about a different way? Maybe you can sample badly, but conveniently. And I do mean this literally. In a convenience sampling, we simply include individuals who are convenient. Unfortunately, this group may not be representative of the population. So again, let's say I wanted to get Divine Child students' opinions. I stand outside of my classroom door and I randomly stop people in the hallway and say, hey, I need to know your opinion. This is the idea of a convenient sample. They were convenient to me. I stopped them. I asked them a couple questions. It seems good. It seems too good to be true, actually. And because I'm not systematic in who I'm asking and there is not a sense of randomness built in, this is not good. Convenient sampling is not only a problem for students of statistics, it is a widespread problem in the business world and in media. The easiest people for a company or media outlet to sample are its own clients. Those subjects are not likely to be representative of the whole population. And that is the idea we keep going to. We want our data to be representative of the population of interest. So, other ways to sample badly. Sample from a bad sampling frame. A simple random sample from an incomplete sampling frame creates bias because the individuals not included may differ from the ones in the frame. So if you are not equally likely to choose everyone in the population because people aren't included, you might lose out on your opinions of the entire population. Also, undercoverage or underrepresentation. Many bad survey designs suffer from undercoverage, in which some part of the population is not sampled at all or has a smaller representation in the sample than it has in the population. So we really have to look out for undercoverage. Now, you might be asking yourself, what else can go wrong, Mr. Swenson? Well, watch out for non-respondents. A common and serious potential source of bias for most surveys is non-response bias. If you can't get a census and get everyone's opinions, or the school sends out a survey and asks you, please fill this out, and we don't actually hear back from everybody. So let's say we're trying to figure out if block scheduling was effective in the first quarter, and I ask all of the teachers, and then we have 60 teachers in the school, and only 35% respond. And those 35 out of the 60 teachers respond. And those 35 teachers have very strong opinions one way or the other. Well, we have to take into account those non-responses. No survey succeeds in getting responses from everyone. The problem is that those who do not respond may differ from those who do, and the difference may affect the variables and results we are seeking. Okay, what else could go wrong? Don't bore respondents with surveys that go on and on. We've all seen those before. It's like, just click in 5 minutes, you'll be done with the survey. And 50 questions later, you're still reading through 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Surveys that are too long are more likely to be refused or incomplete, reducing the response rate and biasing all the results. The attention span of most respondents is not very long. So when you're sampling and asking people questions, the idea is to keep it short and sweet. Work hard to avoid influencing the responses yourself. Response bias refers to anything in the survey design that might influence the responses. This is bad questions. That's what I want you to think in response bias. For example, the wording of a question can influence responses. The cars collided, or the cars smashed into each other. You have a picture in your head, and you might be influenced one way or the other. So be on the lookout for biases in any survey you encounter before you collect the data. Think, we want to pilot this before we launch it. Consider potential influences before you begin. There's no way to save a biased sample. Once it's biased, it's garbage. Spend your time and resources reducing biases. That is the goal for a representative sample. If possible, run a pilot test. That will give you an idea if the results are worth pursuing or warn you of potential sources of bias in the design. Use your creativity in designing an efficient, unbiased survey, not in making a pretty, colorful, foo-foo pictures. We want this to be efficient. Always report your sampling methods in detail to report out full disclosure. So what else have we discussed? A representative sample can offer us important insights about populations. Again, it's the size of the sample, not its fraction of the larger population, that determines the precision of the statistics it yields. There are several ways to draw samples, all based on the power of randomness to make them representative of the population of interest. All of these good sampling techniques are based on the power of randomness. I'm going to make that point again. We have simple random samples, stratified samples, cluster samples, systematic samples, and multi-stage sampling techniques. What have we learned to avoid? We want to avoid sample badly with volunteers because we are worried about response bias, voluntary response bias, convenience sampling, bad sampling frames, undercoverage, non-response, and response biases. Now, write out what each of these means. I want you to be super clear. Each of these has a clear definition in your book. Please make sure you know what you're talking about and we're not just throwing out, oh, that seems like a convenience sample. Oh, that's non-response, or that is a response. I need you to know what those terms mean. If not, check back to the notes. And lastly, why? Bias can also arise from poor sampling methods. Voluntary response bias stems from samples that are allowed to select themselves. Convenience samples are likely to be flawed for similar reasons. Undercoverage occurs when individuals from a subgroup of the population are selected less often than they should be, which means they are underrepresented. So if we were able to be in class, I would love to run this experiment with you. I might try to think about this in our Zoom sessions, but for the time being, just listen to this setup. The students in the class form our population of interest. We are going to sample using the various methods we have discussed in class. Complete the survey questions and turn them in. Select a colored chip from the envelope and pass the envelope to the next member of the population. This will divide our population into blues, greens, reds, and whites. I want you to think about, if we did that, what are we starting to do? Determine how to sample a group of 16 using each method and have the selected participants fill out our brief survey. Describe how we will apply each method of sampling from a volunteer, simple random sample, systematic, stratified, and cluster, and multi-stage, and create a sample of each type from the class. For each of the samples created, complete the survey questions again. Then complete the frequency table for the gender and calculate the sample mean. See, this is the type of design that we want to look at. We want to be able to design ways we could collect information and ask good questions. So I'm going to pause here. As you can see, there are much more details into the AP questions that are posted and the solutions to each one of your questions. So I know when you guys get stuck, you can come back to these notes and we can go over each problem. I'm providing you these resources so that you can check your work if you are stuck. The goal is that you understand how to do these types of problems. As always, we will have time built into class if you have any questions to ask me. And with that, I say thank you again for tuning in. We are one more chapter away from being complete with Unit 3 about collecting data. And I will see you in the next one, Falcon.